The morning my family chose my brother over me, I had $40 in my pocket, one bag on my shoulder, and nowhere to go. I was not crying. I was not shouting. I was not begging anyone to change their mind. I just stood in that driveway with my one bag and my $40, and I looked at the faces of the people who were supposed to love me equally, and I understood, completely, finally, with no room left for doubt, that they never had. What they did not know, what none of them could have known as they watched me walk away, was that 18 months before that morning I had quietly bought a piece of land. Not a big piece. Just the street their new house was going to sit on. And the day they moved in, the day they finally felt safe and settled and like everything had worked out the way they always believed it would, I received a letter in the mail. From their landlord, asking me what I wanted to do. My name is Zoe. I am 28 years old. I grew up in a family that had 2 children but only ever really invested in one of them. I was not the one they invested in, but I am the one who ended up owning the street. This is my story. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because you cannot understand this story without understanding him. Marcus is my older brother. He is loud and charming and has one of those faces that makes people want to believe whatever he is saying. He could walk into a room having done something completely wrong and walk out with everyone convinced it was someone else's fault. He had been doing this his entire life, and our parents had been the most willing audience he ever had. Growing up, I watched Marcus get away with things that would have had serious consequences for me. Failed grades, broken curfews, the money that went missing from the household jar that my mother kept on the kitchen counter. Every time, every single time, there was an explanation. A reason. A special circumstance that meant this particular situation was different from what it looked like. And our parents believed him. Every time. I stopped being surprised by that around the time I was 12. Now tell me, have you ever been neglected by the people you call family? If yes, drop a comment telling me how you proved them wrong, and if no, tell me what you will do if you ever happen to. I read every single comment. By the time I was 20, I had simply accepted it and built my life accordingly. I moved out at 22. I put myself through a business degree at night while working full days at an office job that was not glamorous but paid steadily. I lived small. I saved carefully. I paid every bill on time and asked my family for nothing because I had learned early that the relationship only worked in one direction. At 25, I bought my first property. It was a run-down studio apartment in one of the cheaper parts of the city. The kind of place that estate agents describe as having potential, which is their polite way of saying it needed everything. I renovated it myself over 3 weekends with tools I borrowed from a neighbor and YouTube tutorials I watched until midnight. I fixed the bathroom. I repainted every wall. I replaced the kitchen fittings one by one. Then I rented it out and said nothing to my family, because I had also learned that anything I had became something my family felt they had a right to. I was 28 when the phone call came. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. I could hear from the first word that she had been crying. Marcus was in trouble. Not small trouble. The kind of trouble that comes with people showing up at your door. He had borrowed money 18 months ago to fund a business idea, something to do with importing goods. The details were vague in the way Marcus's details always were, and the business had collapsed within 6 weeks. The money had not been paid back. It had been growing instead, with interest that the people he had borrowed from were not flexible about. My mother said the family needed to pull together. She said it was an emergency. She said this was what family did. I asked her one question before I said anything else. I asked whether Marcus had been asked to sell his car. There was a pause on the line. She said Marcus needed his car for work. I said I understood and that I would call her back. I did not call her back that day. Instead, I spent 3 days making some calls of my own. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the subscribe button right now and turn on your notification bell so you never miss any of our stories. Like this video and drop a comment. I had a friend who worked in finance, a sharp, methodical woman named Kezia, who owed me a favor from 3 years back and was exactly the kind of person you want looking at a financial situation when you need to understand it clearly. I asked her to look at what I had been told. What she found made me sit down at my kitchen table and stay there for a while. The debt was real. The threat was real. But the picture my mother had painted was not the complete one. Marcus had been borrowing from multiple places at the same time, taking from one source to partially cover another, the way you pile one problem on top of the next and hope none of them fall over simultaneously. Total amount owed was significantly larger than what my mother had mentioned. And Marcus had assets. A car worth more than my mother had admitted when I asked about it. A small business account with a balance my parents did not appear to know existed. He was not a man with nothing. He was a man who had decided that asking his sister was easier than using what he had. I called my father. This was something I almost never did. My father was a quiet man who had spent most of my childhood in the comfortable position of agreeing with my mother, which mostly meant agreeing with whatever made life easiest for Marcus. I told him what I had found. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Zoe, sometimes in a family you have to accept that different people need different things." I said, "I understand, Dad." I hung up. I opened my laptop. What I opened was not a bank transfer page. It was a property listing website. I had been watching a specific listing for 6 weeks. A strip of undeveloped land on the edge of the city. Cheap because it looked like nothing, just land bare and unbuilt on in an area that most buyers had no particular reason to look at twice. But I had been reading planning documents. I read them the way other people read the news, regularly, carefully, looking for the small details that most people skip past. And 6 weeks before my father's phone call, I had found something in a rezoning application that made me bookmark a listing and watch it with the particular focused attention of someone who has spotted something nobody else has noticed yet. A residential development had been approved 2 streets over. Mixed use. Significant scale. Construction was going to start within the year. The strip of land I had been watching sat directly between that development site and the main road, which meant that any traffic moving in or out of the new development was going to need to pass through or alongside my land. Access easements. That is the term. The legal right to use another person's land to reach your own. Developers need them. They pay for them. And they pay more when they have no alternative. My father's phone call clarified something for me. My savings were not going to Marcus. I transferred my deposit money that same week. The land was mine. I told nobody. 2 weeks later, my mother called again. Her voice was warm this time. Careful. The particular warmth of someone who wants something and is building toward asking for it. She asked how I was doing. She asked about work. After about 4 minutes, she asked whether I had given any more thought to the family situation. I said I had. I said I was not in a position to help right now. The warmth switched off like a light. She said she was disappointed. She said she had thought I understood what was at stake. She said Marcus was family and that family came first and that I had always been the one they could count on. I said I knew. She said she hoped I would reconsider. I said I would think about it. I did not think about it. 3 weeks after that, Marcus called to tell me he had sorted everything out. That someone had helped him. That things were fine now. He sounded relieved and slightly odd, and he did not explain who had helped him or how, and I asked no questions because I had already started to suspect the answer. I found out the truth through my aunt 6 weeks later. My parents had remortgaged their house. Not a small remortgage. A significant one, large enough to cover Marcus's full debt, with monthly repayments that were going to stretch them for years. They had made this decision without mentioning it to me. Without asking me. They had put their home at risk for Marcus and had not told their other child. What they had told Marcus, and what Marcus had apparently accepted without any visible discomfort, was that Zoe had refused to help. In the family story that had been built around this situation, I was the reason the remortgage had been necessary. I called my mother. Calmly. I asked if it was true. She confirmed it. Then she said, "Marcus needed us, Zoe. You didn't step up, so we did what we had to do." I said, "I understand." I hung up. I did not call back. What followed was the most important 18 months of my life. I did not spend them being angry. I did not spend them rehearsing conversations or imagining confrontations or lying awake running through what I should have said. I had spent enough of my life doing those things. These 18 months I spent differently. I worked. I saved. I watched the development 2 streets from my land begin to take shape. The machinery arriving first, then the groundwork, then the slow, visible rise of something being built that would change the value of everything around it. I refinanced the studio apartment I had bought at 25. Its value had increased significantly since my renovations, and used the equity to begin preparing my land for what I already knew was coming. Not building yet. Just getting the approvals in place, the surveys done, the paperwork clean. Making it ready. I did not contact my family. I did not explain myself or update anyone or let anyone know what I was doing. I had learned that silence was not weakness. I had learned it from years of being overlooked, and I had decided to use it differently. 8 months in, a development company called. Not the one building 2 streets over. A different one, larger, working on a project that needed road access through the area. They had identified my land as a critical point. They wanted to talk. I asked them to put everything in writing. The written proposal arrived. I took it to my property lawyer, a woman named Adiz who had been handling my property work for 2 years and who had told me at our first meeting that I reminded her of herself 2 decades ago, which was the highest compliment she knew how to give and also the reason she had always charged me fairly. Adiz read the proposal in about 4 minutes. She looked up and said, "They need your land more than this offer is suggesting." I said, "I know." She said, "Shall we respond accordingly?" I said yes. The negotiation took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, my father sent a text, just checking in, he said, the first contact from either parent in 4 months. I replied, "Good. Busy." I left it there. The development company came back with a revised offer that was significantly higher than the first. The final figure, not a sale, just an access easement, the right to use my land permanently in exchange for annual payments, was more than I had earned in the previous 3 years combined. I signed the agreement on a Wednesday afternoon. I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table. I looked at the number in my account for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and started looking at property listings. One of the listings that came up that evening was a new residential development on the edge of the city. 12 premium townhouses. Private gated road. High-spec everything. Pre-launch pricing available to contracted partners of the development company. The development company that had just signed my easement agreement. Called Adiz. She pulled the full plans the next morning. The private road running through the development connected to the main access road. The main access road ran through my land. Every single house in that development sat on a street that was, technically and legally and on every document that existed, mine. I owned the road they were all going to live on. Adiz laid the documents on the table and was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want to buy one of the houses as well?" I said, "No. I want to know who else is buying them." Adiz pulled the pre-launch buyer list the following day. She called me in the morning and said she needed me to sit down before she read me something. I sat down. She read me a name. Marcus. Marcus and his girlfriend had put a deposit on Unit 7. 3 bedrooms. Premium end of the price range. Finance, the documentation showed, with a significant contribution from their parents. The same parents who had remortgaged their house. The same parents who had told me I had not stepped up. They were using the equity from their remortgaged family home to help Marcus buy a premium townhouse. On a private road that I owned. I was quiet on the phone for a long time. Adiz waited. She was good at waiting. Then I said 4 words. "Don't do anything yet." I put the phone down. I went for a walk. 2 hours. When I came back, I made tea and I sat at my table and I thought very carefully, not angrily, not emotionally, just carefully, about what I actually wanted to happen next. I did not want to block the purchase. I did not want to show up at anyone's door with documents and a speech. That was not who I was. What I wanted was simple. I wanted them to move in, to settle, to feel safe, to feel like everything had finally worked out the way they always believed it would for Marcus. And then I wanted them to get a letter. Not a legal letter. Not a threatening one. Just a standard letter from their landlord, introducing herself. I called Adiz back and explained exactly what I had in mind. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "That is one of the most elegant things I have heard in 20 years of property law." She said, "Shall I draft it?" I said yes. She said, "I am going to enjoy every word." Marcus and his girlfriend moved into Unit 7 on a Saturday in October. I knew the date because Adiz had the development schedule. I did not drive past. I did not watch. I simply knew that somewhere across the city my brother was carrying boxes into a house on a street I owned, and that my parents were probably there helping, and that everyone was probably feeling like things had finally come right. I went to my apartment. I made dinner. I watched something on television. I slept very well. The letter went out on Monday morning, first class, on Adiz's firm letterhead, addressed to all residents of the development. Standard property management communication introducing the landowner of the access road and easement. Completely routine, except for the name at the bottom. My full name, my address, my contact details. It arrived at Unit 7 on a Tuesday morning. Marcus called at 11 a.m. I was in a meeting. I let it ring. He called again at 11:15. I let that ring too. At 11:32 my mother called. Then my father. Then Marcus again. I finished my meeting. I got a coffee. I sat at my desk and looked at the missed calls, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Something quieter and more lasting than both of those. The particular feeling of a person who did the right thing for themselves and then waited and let the truth arrive on its own schedule. I called Marcus back at 12:15. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He said my name in a voice I had never heard from him before. Careful, slightly unsteady, the voice of someone who has just discovered that the ground they are standing on belongs to someone they spent years underestimating. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Since before you moved in." Silence. "Did you plan this?" he said. I said, "I planned to buy land I believed would increase in value. Everything else arranged itself." Another silence. "What are you going to do?" he said. I said, "Nothing, Marcus. You can live there. The easement agreement is with the development company. Your life is not affected by this in any practical way." A pause. "Then why did you send the letter?" he said. I said, "Because I own the land. It was the correct thing to do as the landowner. Nothing more." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said one sentence. Not an apology. Not an accusation. Something in between, the kind of thing a person says when they have run out of every other option and have finally arrived with nowhere left to go at honesty. He said, "You were always smarter than all of us. We just never said it out loud." I let that sentence sit in the air between us. Then I said goodbye and went back to work. My mother called that evening. Her voice was different from any version I had heard before. Not the warm managing tone. Not the crying emergency tone. Something flatter. The voice of a woman who had run out of ways to frame a situation in her own favor and was standing for the first time in front of the plain truth of it. She talked for a long time. About Marcus and the debt and the remortgage. About the pressure of it all. She edged toward the subject of me multiple times without landing directly, circling it the way people circle things that need more honesty than they are currently capable of giving. I did not help her get there. I did not fill the silences or smooth the edges or make it easier for her. I had spent my entire life making difficult things easier for people who never noticed the effort. Not tonight. She finally landed on it. She said, "I think we didn't see you properly, Zoe." I said, "No, you didn't." She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." She asked, "What happens now?" I said, "I don't know yet, but I'm the one who gets to decide." After I hung up, I opened my notebook, the one I had always kept for property records and plans, and I turned to a new page. I wrote 2 words at the top. My terms. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just a quiet private declaration that whatever came next was going to be on my terms. I was not closing any doors. I was just making sure I was the one holding the keys. I went to bed early and slept the way I always slept after making a decision I was fully at peace with. Things moved quickly after that. The development company came back with an expanded offer. The project was growing and they needed additional easement rights. The new figure on the table made the first one look modest. I met with the D's and we went through every option: easement expansion, full sale, joint development partnership, going alone. Each option had a number. The numbers got larger the further down the list we went. I asked the question I had been building toward without fully knowing it. What would the land be worth if I developed it myself? A D's looked at me and said, "I was wondering when you were going to ask that." I spent a weekend walking the land on my own, all of it slowly, standing at different points and looking at what surrounded it and what it could become. On Sunday evening, I called a D's and told her what I had decided. Not full sale. Not going alone. A joint development partnership. Pool input. Shared risk. My land, their construction expertise, both names on the project. A company I had spent 3 weeks researching, smaller than the big developers, a track record I respected, people who had built what they said they would build. The agreement was signed 6 weeks later. I sat in a D's office and looked at my name on the partnership documents and let myself feel what I had not let myself feel during all the months of work and waiting. I had started with $40 in one bag. I had a partnership now. My father came to see me on a Sunday afternoon about a month after that. He sat in my apartment and looked around at it carefully, the way a person looks at a place they are seeing properly for the first time, and he was quiet for a while before he spoke. He talked about his own father, about patterns that move through families without anyone deciding to pass them on, about Marcus, about choices that get made for complicated reasons that do not fully excuse them but do sometimes explain them. He did not make excuses. He made explanations. Those are different things. Then he looked at me and said something that nobody in my family had ever said to me directly in 28 years of my life. He said, "You deserved better from us." From me. I am sorry I didn't see it sooner. I looked at my father, older than I remembered, more tired, carrying something heavy in a way he no longer had the energy to hide, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of the space where forgiveness could eventually live. I made tea. He stayed 2 hours. We talked about things we had never talked about. When he left, he hugged me at the door, a real hug, not the brief performed kind, and I let him. I closed the door and stood in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. A week later, an envelope arrived. Marcus's handwriting on the front. Messy and slightly cramped, the same handwriting from birthday cards I had once received and then stopped receiving. 4 pages. He had never written 4 pages of anything in his life as far as I knew. The handwriting was uneven and the sentences were not always perfect, and there were places where he had clearly crossed things out and started again. It was the most honest thing I had ever read from him. He wrote about growing up as the favorite without ever asking to be. About the pressure of it. About the debt and the shame of how easy it had been to let help come from a direction it should never have come from. He wrote about the letter from a D's firm and exactly how it had felt to see my name at the bottom of it. He wrote it felt like justice. Not the kind that hurts. Quiet kind. Kind that just lands. Like something finally being where it was supposed to be. He said he did not expect anything from the letter. He said he was proud of me, which he admitted he had no right to say but was saying anyway because it was true. He said he hoped, if I was willing, we could figure out what it meant to be siblings properly. Not the version we had been. Something real. He signed it simply Marcus. I read it twice. I folded it carefully and I put it on my desk. Not in a drawer. Not filed away. On my desk. Where I could see it. I picked up my phone. I did not call Marcus. Not yet. Some things needed more time than one letter. Some doors needed to be opened slowly, with both people ready on each side. I called a D's instead. "Tell me where we are with the development timeline," I said. She said, "On schedule. Breaking ground in 6 weeks." I said, "Good." I stood at my window and looked out at the city I had navigated alone for 6 years, with $40 in one bag and a belief so quiet I had barely known it was there, that if I worked carefully and thought clearly and refused to be made small by people who should have known better, that one day I would be standing exactly where I was standing now. My street. My terms. My life. I smiled, not for anyone, not for an audience, just for myself in the private, honest way of someone who has finally, after a very long walk, arrived. Then I went back to work. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with this story all the way to the end. If this story spoke to you, if you have ever been the one who showed up while others took, the one who worked quietly while others got the applause, the one who was told to step up right before someone decided you hadn't, I want you to know that this community sees you. Come back tomorrow. Come back every day. We will always be here with something new, something real, and something worth every minute of your time. We will see you in the next story.